Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to episode 22 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news every week. I'm Steve Elliott, editor of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First of all, let's take a look at our Toke TV Bud Pick of the Week. We have a strain called Frankenstein this week, an indica dominant. As you can see, a very trichome heavy indica dominant. Frankenstein is a strain I found at an access point called Green Comfort in Port Orchard, Washington for $12 a gram. Green Comfort sells everything, 20 plus strains of flowers for $10 a gram. Frankenstein is the only strain that costs $12. And let me tell you, if any strain is worth $12, this is it. 2 hours after toking this, I still wasn't feeling any pain. Highly recommended. Let's do the news. In Colorado, the rollout of recreational legalization on January 1st brought long lines for a smooth rollout. At 8 a.m. on New Year's Day, an ex-Marine named Sean Azariti became the first person in Colorado to legally buy a bag of recreational marijuana under Legalization Measure Amendment 64, approved by state voters last year. Azariti is an Iraq veteran who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. He had been unable to buy marijuana under Colorado's medicinal cannabis program because PTSD isn't an authorized condition under the state's medical marijuana law. He bought an 1/8 ounce, 3.5 grams of Bubba Kush for $40 and some cannabis-infused truffles for $9.28, comprising the very first legal sale under Amendment 64. It hasn't even really sunk in fully, but it's a huge honor to say the least, Azariti said. The implementation of Colorado's marijuana legalization law makes it the first U.S. state and the first political jurisdiction anywhere on earth to permit recreational marijuana since the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs was adopted through the United Nations back in 1961. Now, according to observers, if Colorado is able to successfully implement cannabis legalization without creating major problems, the tourism and tax benefits seem likely to inspire several other states to quickly follow Colorado's example. Of course, the voters of one other state, Washington, already took the plunge by approving Limited Legalization Measure Initiative 502 on the same day last November 2012 that is, that Colorado voters approved Amendment 64. Washington state's law is taking longer to implement due to extensive regulations recommended by the State Liquor Control Board, which was put in charge of implementing legalization in Washington. Colorado has approved 136 licenses for retail marijuana sales. 3/4 of those are in the city and county of Denver. 37 licensed retailers open for sales on New Year's Day, most of them in the Denver area. All of these are at sites that have already been selling cannabis for medicinal purposes. Under Colorado's Amendment 64, the initial round of applications for retail recreational marijuana licenses was limited to medical cannabis dispensary operators. Colorado residents 21 years and older are allowed to buy up to an ounce of weed per transaction. Out-of-staters are allowed to purchase up to a 1/4 ounce, 7 grams. 2 non-residents of Colorado who bought the legal limit of a 1/4 ounce of pot at Medicine Man, a 20,000-foot marijuana store where a line of 75 people had formed by 10 a.m., said it cost roughly $130 for 7 grams. Prices are expected to remain high, at least for a while, with just a few retailers and high demand. Observers expect these prices to fall gradually as competition sets in. Medical marijuana advocates are worried that the new industry's rollout will inflate prices, making cannabis unaffordable for patients who need it medically. At mid-afternoon on Wednesday, at least one dispensary was charging $70 for 1/8 ounces of top-shelf marijuana. The day before, medical marijuana patients had been able to get that same amount for as little as $25. We hope that the focus on recreational doesn't take the focus away from patients who really need this medicine, said Laura Creho of the patient advocacy group Cannabis Therapy Institute. Everything's gone pretty smoothly, according to Barbara Brohl, head of Colorado's Department of Revenue Marijuana Enforcement Division. In Alabama this week, some bad news. A child welfare check led to the arrest of medical marijuana activists in Alabama. This child welfare check, which resulted in the arrest of a prominent Alabama medical marijuana activist after deputies discovered a cannabis growing operation in Coleman County. The call to the Coleman County Sheriff's Office for a child welfare check resulted in the arrest of Chris Butts, 42, his girlfriend Sonia Franks, 46, Stephen Franks, 22, and Amber Nixon, 22, after deputies claimed they smelled marijuana when Butts answered the door. Chris Butts serves as the executive director of the Alabama Medical Marijuana Coalition, the AMMJC, and this is a group focused on changing Alabama laws concerning medical marijuana. The whole case started at 11 a.m. Saturday as an initial call for a welfare check on a child, according to Coleman County Sheriff Mike Rainey. Sergeant Terry Smith and K-9 Deputy Kevin Lewis responded to the residence where they knocked on the door. As they were standing in the doorway, they could smell a very strong odor of marijuana, the sheriff claimed. Now, one can't help wondering if K-9 units are routinely sent on child welfare calls. That seems a little bit odd. The deputies waited at the front door while Chris Butts got the child, reportedly 11 or 12 years old, from inside the house for a quick inspection. Once they had looked at the child, the deputies, clearly with some other agenda than just the welfare of children, asked if they could come inside for a closer inspection. They asked for permission to enter the residence, but they were told they could not enter, Sheriff Rainey said. At that time, the deputies detained all 4 adults inside the residence. All 4 adults were detained until a search warrant could be issued by a Coleman County judge. After getting the search warrant with CNAT, the Coleman Narcotics Enforcement Team, they entered the home where they discovered several glass jars with marijuana buds inside them, according to Sheriff Rainey. An outbuilding was also searched, and inside that, agents said they discovered a 3-room system for growing marijuana. Sheriff Rainey claimed the outbuilding was listed in the search warrant description. When our K-9 deputy Kevin Lewis was walking the area, his K-9 partner indicated the presence of narcotics inside the outbuilding, so CNET added it to the list, Sheriff Rainey said. Could it be any more obvious that the child's welfare wasn't really the priority of law enforcement, or even the reason they were there? Once inside, approximately 30 marijuana plants were discovered in the somewhat elaborate setup, according to Sheriff Rainey. Each of the 4 adults were charged with trafficking marijuana and were jailed at the Coleman County Detention Center, each on $1 million bond, except Nixon, who is being held on $1.5 million bond, and additionally charged with possession of a controlled substance after deputies claimed they found a small amount of heroin in her possession. Stephen Franks bonded out on Sunday, while the other 3 are still being held at the Coleman County Detention Center. Sheriff Rainey said the child in question, about 12, was released to a family member. In Illinois, the medical marijuana law there went into effect on January 1st. State agencies will begin establishing a system of regulated medical marijuana cultivation and distribution to individuals with serious illnesses in Illinois. Patients will not be protected from arrest until a patient registry is established by the Department of Public Health. Legislation adopted this year to establish a state-regulated medical marijuana program in Illinois has gone into effect now with the new year. Licensed medical marijuana cultivation and distribution facilities are expected to begin producing medical marijuana and providing it to patients in late 2014. Now, patients with qualifying medical conditions will not be protected from arrest until the Department of Public Health has established the patient registry. That's important to remember. They have to approve individual applications to the medical marijuana program before patients have arrest protection. We hope state officials will work swiftly to ensure seriously ill patients no longer face legal penalties for using medical marijuana, said Chris Lindsay, a legislative analyst for the Marijuana Policy Project. Illinois patients and their families have already waited long enough, according to Lindsay. The Illinois Medical Cannabis Pilot Program, MCPP, will require coordination by 3 state agencies. The Department of Public Health will oversee the creation and management of the state's medical marijuana patient registry. The Department of Agriculture will regulate medical marijuana cultivation facilities. And the Department of Financial and Professional Responsibilities will regulate medical marijuana dispensaries. These agencies will have 120 days from January 1st to develop rules for the program and file them with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. That's a bipartisan legislative oversight committee that will review the rules and conduct a public comment period. That process is expected to take about 3 or 4 months, and the state has created a website for the program at mcpp.illinois.gov, and you can get that link at the Hemp News story, Medical Marijuana Law to go into effect January 1st. Illinois is on the right track, but it is critical that state agencies implement the program within the next few months, according to Lindsay. States with similar laws have implemented them much more quickly. Once this system is in place, seriously ill people who benefit from medical marijuana will finally have legal and reliable access to their medicine. Governor Pat Quinn signed the medical marijuana legislation into law on August the 1st, making Illinois the 20th state in the nation, in addition to the District of Columbia, to adopt a law allowing people with serious illnesses to use medical marijuana if their doctors recommend it. In Michigan, a pharmaceutical grade marijuana law has been signed by the governor, but it needs federal approval to actually take effect. Michigan Governor Rick Snyder on Monday signed a new law that would allow the state to certify pharmaceutical grade cannabis, but the law can't take effect unless and until the federal government reclassifies marijuana as a Schedule II drug suitable for medical use. Medical marijuana has been legal since voters approved an initiative legalizing it back in 2008 in Michigan, but it remains illegal for any purpose under federal law. The Obama administration, however, has pledged to respect state marijuana laws. Senate Bill 660, which is now Michigan Public Act 268 of 2013, provides the framework for Michigan to regulate large-scale cannabis growers and sell marijuana in pharmacies if the federal government recategorizes it in the future. This pharmaceutical-grade marijuana registry would not replace Michigan's current medical marijuana law, which uses a patient-caregiver model, according to its backers, but patients would have to give up their current medical marijuana cards if they want to participate in the pharmaceutical-grade medical marijuana program. The registry's purpose, according to sponsor Senator Roger Kahn, a Republican from Saginaw Township, is to provide patients with consistently dosed product that is tested for molds, pesticides, and other toxins. The bill will give them a pure and pharmaceutical-grade alternative to homegrown marijuana so that they'll have the ability to make a choice, and in making that choice, they will have a product that accurately fits the name medical, Kahn said back in November. But skeptics suggest that the real motive is to take growing cannabis out of the hands of patients and providers and put it into the hands of a few large corporations like Prairie Plant Systems Incorporated of Canada. That's a biopharmaceutical company that wants to grow pot in an abandoned mine in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Prairie Plant Systems has already grown medical marijuana for the Canadian government for more than a decade, and it wants to extend its quite profitable operations to the U.S. as well. Former Speaker of the House in Michigan, Chuck Perricone, lobbied for the bill on behalf of Prairie Plant Systems. If the federal government does in fact reclassify marijuana as Schedule II, it could be part of a move to centralize control of the medicinal cannabis industry within Big Pharma. And that could be seen as part of a larger plan to shut down the mom and pop medical marijuana industry by some insiders. In California, Attorney General there says marijuana legalization could mean hundreds of millions of dollars in savings for the state. A California ballot initiative to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana got a positive review from State Attorney General Kamala Harris, who last week released a summary saying legalization could save the state hundreds of millions of dollars. Harris's summary of the Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Revenue Act, MCLR, explained that it would legalize under California law the use, cultivation, possession, transportation, storage, and sale of cannabis. Reduced costs in the low hundreds of millions of dollars annually to state and local governments related to enforcing certain marijuana-related offenses, handling the related criminal cases in the court system, and incarcerating and supervising certain marijuana offenders, the fiscal analysis reads. Potential net additional tax revenues in the low hundreds of millions of dollars annually related to the production and sale of marijuana a portion of which is required to be spent on education, health care, public safety, drug abuse education and treatment, and the regulation of commercial marijuana activities. There's one complication in the language of the initiative, according to Dennis Romero at LA Weekly. The measure originally read that the law could protect people under age 21 from using marijuana instead of shall protect them. An amended version now awaits a title and summary from the Attorney General, and that's expected to be released on January 31st. We're expecting a title and summary nearly identical to the one that was just released, if not even more supportive, according to Dave Hodges, a primary backer of MCLR. There isn't any change that would affect the title and summary that was released, according to Hodges. On Toke Signals this week, a story: Washington State wants medical marijuana shops to pay taxes, but an attorney says not so fast. Washington State last week reminded medical marijuana dispensary operators that they must pay taxes, quote unquote, and the State Department of Revenue plans to collect back taxes from about 300 dispensaries that seem not to have paid any. But Seattle-based activist attorney Douglas Hyatt says he's hopping mad about the announcement, and he's advising shop owners to contact him before paying anything. The department on Friday sent letters to dispensaries, medical makers, and other businesses involved in medical marijuana, emphasizing that taxes apply to their transactions, and this according to Bob Young at the Seattle Times. According to the Department of Revenue, about 500 registered dispensaries are already paying taxes on their earnings. That number represents a big increase over previous Department of Revenue reports. Department spokeswoman Kim Schmacky said 102 medical marijuana businesses paid about $2.5 million in state and local taxes in 2012. That number is likely not perfect, according to Schmacky. For instance, some entrepreneurs may be doing business under different names than the one under which they are registered with the state for tax purposes. Now, according to the state, dispensaries are supposed to pay a retail sales tax of 6.5% on any transaction. Local jurisdictions are allowed to add additional sales tax on top of that. Companies are also required to pay a tax on gross receipts called the Business and Occupation Tax, the B&O tax. Most businesses are required to pay 47 cents of B&O tax on each $100 of gross income, according to Schmacky. Now, Schmacky said some in the medical marijuana community are confused about their tax obligations. That's why it's important, he said, to put out these letters directly to businesses. Under prescription drugs, Schmacky said, medical marijuana is not exempt from retail sales tax. Hyatt strongly disputes that assertion. He says that medical marijuana authorizations are equivalent to prescriptions. Schmacky wouldn't estimate the amount of back taxes the state says is owed, or the amount the 500 compliant businesses paid in taxes in 2013. Pressure on dispensaries to pay taxes is being ratcheted up as I-502, the recreational legalization measure approved by Washington voters last year, is being implemented. Marijuana sold in state licensed stores, which are expected to open by June, will be taxed 25% at each level of the three-tiered process in the state: cultivation, processing, which is curing, and retail, plus sales taxes. The Washington State Liquor Control Board, put in charge of recreational marijuana by I-502, had its authority extended to medical marijuana as well by the legislature. The Liquor Control Board has recommended that the system of patient collective gardens, that is dispensaries, be shut down, and that all medical marijuana patients be required to buy their cannabis at the state licensed marijuana stores rather than dispensaries. Now, they make it sound like a done deal, but we haven't even lost that tax round yet, Hyatt told me Thursday afternoon. We're just starting to fight this round. Hyatt, along with Ace attorney David Arganian, is mounting a legal challenge to these taxes. Anybody that receives a tax notice can call us, Doug Hyatt told me. There are a couple of good reasons why they can't tax medical marijuana, Hyatt told us. One of them has to do with the fact that under traditional tax analysis, it's technically an illegal transaction. Collecting sales tax on illegal transactions is against public policy. And the second is the fact that we don't tax medicine in this state. Now, when Hyatt refers to a dispensary sale of medical marijuana as an illegal transaction, he's referring to federal law on the subject. I've been long prepared to argue that an authorization is the functional equivalent of a prescription, Hyatt said. Additionally, they don't have any authority from the legislature to tax medical marijuana, and the general taxing authority they have is not good enough. Hyatt would also like to talk to anyone who got a license for an I-502 business and then got denied by the county in which they are located. You can call Douglas Hyatt's law office at 206-412-8807, and his complete contact information is on Toke Signals in the story, Washington State Wants Medical Marijuana Shops to Pay Taxes. Activist attorney says not so fast. You can find his website, his physical address, and his phone number in that story. In Colorado, we have an Alabama family who relocated there to treat their epileptic daughter with marijuana. An Alabama family celebrated their first New Year in Colorado after locating there. Butch and Mandy Swan of Haleyville, Alabama, moved to Colorado on September 15th with their children Allie, 14, Cy, 6, and Carter, 2. Allie has violent seizures that brain surgery and potent pharmaceuticals haven't helped. The parents administer 3 oral doses of marijuana-derived CBD oil containing cannabidiol to Allie every day in order to control her seizures. This has kind of been, I wouldn't say a depressing Christmas, because we're trying to make it as good as we can for the children, but it's not like back at home, Butch Swan said. It's sad to an extent that we don't have our family, but at the same time, we understand what Christmas is all about. That's the birth of Jesus. As long as the children are okay, that's all that matters. The Swans uprooted their family to give their teenage daughter a chance to change her life with CBD oil, which doesn't produce marijuana's high, but helps control the seizures, which started when Allie was just 6 months old. Doctors don't fully understand the cause of her seizures. The Swans were inspired to try medical marijuana for their daughter after they saw Dr. Sanjay Gupta's CNN medical marijuana documentary, Weed. Us being out here away from our families, everybody out here calls us Colorado refugees, said Butch, a 41-year-old life insurance salesman. We're Colorado prisoners, not because of Colorado, but because of the rest of the United States. We can't cross state lines with the medication. Health insurance won't cover the oil, so out-of-pocket costs for the CBD oil cost the Swans $587 the first month and $860 the second month in Colorado. The initial doses administered to Allie weren't enough help, but increasing the dose made an impact, according to her father. Her drop seizures went completely away, Butch said. That was a win right there. She noticed her surroundings more. You could tell in her eyes she was more alert and more cognitive. Teachers at school would call us and say she had done this today or that. They were amazed as well. A movement in Alabama to get the state legislature there to legalize use of the marijuana-derived CBD oil is gaining momentum, known as Carley's Law. The bill is named after a Birmingham area child who suffers from Dravet's syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that causes her to have frequent violent seizures. To me, it's a parents' rights issue, said Dustin Chandler, a police officer from Pelham, Alabama, who is rallying support for the bill that could help his 2-year-old daughter, Carly. If people are doing it in other states, we should have the right to do it here, Officer Chandler said. Before we go this week, there is a must-read story I'd like to direct your attention to on Toke Signals. It's from Ron Marksick, the ex-cop, ex-health teacher, ex-registered nurse, who now is one of the top marijuana writers and experts in the world, doing the Worth Repeating series for Toke Signals. Worth Repeating, Medical Marijuana Doesn't Fit on Present Drug Schedule, is Ron's newest piece. It's on Toke Signals right now. And in that piece, Mr. Marksick argues that present-day drug scheduling is an incomplete scale in that it only measures negatives. Medical marijuana doesn't fit into the present drug schedule, Marksick argues, because this unique medicine is so special that its multitude of many actions creates its own standalone category, a positive side, mirror image type of drug scheduling. And you really want to check out this entire fascinating article to increase your own knowledge about medical marijuana on Toke Signals this week. I hope you decide to return for episode 23 next week. Once again, I want to wish you a happy new year, and I hope you decide to stay lifted. See you next time.